Welcome back to DTNsights. I am the host, Renny Vandewege, General Manager of Weather and Climate Intelligence for DTN. I have an awesome guest on tap with me today, Mr. Wade Stettner. Wade, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Renny.
Awesome. Wade is a weather risk consultant, but many will know Wade as a PGA Tour meteorologist. He spends most of his time working on weather with golf. And for those that know me, know that this is a passion area for me. Some would say probably obsessed with golf. I love golf. It is my favorite thing to do. Wade, I'm going to start here with a story. A lot of people ask me about the picture behind me. It's a relatively new addition to my office. It's Tiger Woods standing on the 18th green at Augusta National. And they say, oh, you're a big golf fan. Well, yes, I am. Tiger was my favorite golfer growing up. Still love him to this day. But this picture has extra significance behind it because what most people don't know is that, and this comes from the 2019 Masters when Tiger won after all of his injuries and troubles, won standing there on the 18th green. What most people don't know is DTN was instrumental in that day even happening. We provided a forecast in front of a lot of people wearing green jackets, very important people at Augusta, and convinced them to go off of two tees in threesomes on the final day of the Masters, which they never do and didn't want to do. Tiger Woods ends up getting to play on Sunday. He wins the Masters, and 30 minutes after he puts on his green jacket, severe weather rips through, and the forecast was spot on. Wade, that pretty much describes what your life is like in working with the various golf tours around the world. How would you describe sort of your job? And this is kind of a big question to ask, but your job, when people ask what you do, how would you describe it?
Your story about the Masters in 2019 actually reminds me of last weekend at the Players Championship where I had a similar sort of event. But really, we travel around. We're on site at every professional golf tournament, whether that's men's or women's. We kind of cover them all, and we're there to provide support. We're there to provide support to the operations staff, to the maintenance staff, to the rules staff. We're there to help with the safety aspect of it, as well as for planning the golf tournament in general, the competition rounds. Everything kind of revolves around weather at a lot of these golf tournaments, and we're there to provide the support that they need to make it a successful event.
Absolutely. Golf is so vulnerable to weather, maybe as vulnerable as any sporting event. You just recently celebrated 20 years in your personal history of working these events, and DTN's 20 years of kind of working with the tour. And you got to do it at a very special place. Describe your 20-year anniversary, where that was, and how fun it was to celebrate that.
Yeah, my 20-year anniversary happened at Kapalua on Maui in Hawaii this year. And that was where my very first tournament was 20 years ago. My very first tournament was at Kapalua, and here I am 20 years later, and I got to go back to the same location and do it all over again.
Let's talk about how things have changed over those 20 years. So if I take you back to 20 years ago and we send an even younger, you're a young guy, but an even younger Wade Stettner to Hawaii, which sounds awful as a job, but you go out to Maui and you're working with the PGA Tour or golf tournaments 20 years ago. What was the focus then, and how have you seen the focus change over those 20 years as it relates to kind of the customer concerns and where your impact has changed over time?
Sure. The focus 20 years ago was very much on early alerting for weather and monitoring for lightning. Those were really why we were there. We're also producing forecasts and helping out, but the primary focus was early alerting for approaching weather and then monitoring lightning for possible evacuations. Fast forward 20 years now, and now we're in all aspects of it. We're really in sort of the planning stages of golf, and part of that is just that numerical weather prediction has gotten so good compared to where it was 20 years ago. We're able to do things now that we were not able to do back then.
Sure. What are some of the different aspects of the operations that occur on a week-to-week basis at a golf course where where your decisioning and helping and supportive decisions has changed? As you mentioned, it was kind of sort of originally focused basically on safety, and safety is still number one thing and paramount at any outdoor event. What else has started to get kind of covered in terms of the decision-making process that you help influence?
I'll use the players last week, Players Championship, as an example. I came in early in the week, and we were already talking about high winds on Saturday and Sunday during competition days. And if you're a golf fan, you know that when it comes to major championships, they make the greens as fast as they can. They prepare the golf course for competition status on these championship levels. And they realized right away that they're going to have a problem if we have 30-mile-an-hour winds on the weekend with greens rolling at 13. Those balls can just blow right off the green. So right away, early in the week, they started to adjust their maintenance practices in order to prepare for those winds that far in advance. And part of that was a lot of times they come back to me, Wade, what is your confidence level in these winds? And my confidence level was high all of last week. Like, I felt very confident even early in the week that we're going to have these high winds coming in on the weekend. And it is a good idea to start preparing ahead of time, so the golf course doesn't get away from you when the winds do arrive.
Absolutely. And I think there's other aspects too. There's vendor support. There is, right, you mentioned kind of the agronomy side of decisions that are made. Television's a major factor. I want to get this competition in during television. How have you seen that evolve over time in terms of just the scope of who you work with, who you talk to, who you influence throughout a given week?
Yeah, the bigger the event, the more moving parts are in a golf tournament, and the Players Championship is right up there with the biggest events that golf plays per year. You have live TV, you have 50,000 spectators out on the golf course on a Sunday afternoon. You have vendors, you have VIPs. There's just all sorts of things happening, and everybody wants to know what the weather's going to be for their particular for their jobs that they're doing, because it really affects everybody.
Yeah, amazing. So I want to go back to and learn a little more about you, Wade. So when you got started, let's call it before college, when you thought about a career in weather, what was your original intent in terms of what you wanted to do, and how did that evolve over time?
My original, way back when I first started, was I wanted to work for an airline. I thought that was sort of my goal, and DTN was an aviation forecast company at the time. So when I started, I was an aviation forecaster, and my goal all the time was I would love to work for an airline. Like, that was sort of my dream. And then here we are, 5 years into my career. This PGA Tour opportunity opened up at DTN, and I applied for it. I got it, and I haven't looked back since.
And it turns out you kind of work for the airline, and the fact that you're on a plane all the time.
I am, yes.
So what's that schedule like for you and for your team? That and we should mention, we've got multiple meteorologists that serve in this similar capacity and are supporting multiple tours and multiple events. What's your year play out like in terms of where you're heading and all those pretty cool opportunities you get to see?
For those of us that are full-time out on tour, 26 tournaments per year is considered full-time for us. So that means we're basically living out of hotels over 6 months every year. Traveling, a lot of times it's you go out for 2 weeks, and then you'll get a week or two off. You go back out for 2 weeks. That's the typical rotation. But because we have such an unbalanced schedule, I'm in a very busy part of my schedule right now, where I might work 2 weeks, have 1 week off, go out for 3 weeks, have a week off, just because this time of year is very busy. It gets a little bit slower once you get into the late fall, winter time periods. Those are a little bit slower, but spring, summer, and early fall are really busy, and it's just sort of a nonstop travel.
Yeah, when you're sort of kind of locked in and you start to work with the same people over and over, right? You get very in tune to the operation. What are some of the things you've seen that they really value from the information you provide, in terms of creating confident decisions from the customer perspective?
Having confidence in the forecast, I've found is imperative. Like that's what they love to see, confidence in a forecast, and I feel I can give that to them most of the time. Now there's always situations. Every weather situation is different. Sometimes you have those situations where your golf course is on the edge of what the forecast is calling for. The forecast might be calling for a huge cluster of thunderstorms to be rolling through the state, and your golf course is on the edge. You could either get hit by it and get 2 inches of rain, or it might just miss you by a few miles and you might get nothing. Those are the very difficult ones. And those are the ones that you express that, hey, I have low confidence exactly how this is going to play out. But most other times, I feel like I do have high confidence in the forecast. And when you express that to them, they can make decisions confidently as well.
Yeah. You've experienced truly global travel, global golf tournaments. I'm curious some of the unique local effects that you have found in your travels. What are some of the really kind of challenging golf courses, challenging locations that you forecasted for? And I'll add a second part to that, which is when you're forecasting in the US, where we have a very robust network of data and radars, and then you have to go somewhere, let's just say Mexico or wherever it might be, and maybe you begin lacking some of that. How do you balance those types of scenarios to give really quality information?
Yeah, those are the tough ones. Most recently this spring, I was in Morocco, and Morocco does not have a public radar. So luckily, we had a dry week that week. But in that event, um, I've learned that radar is available through their Met office, but they don't allow that information to exit their office. So you have to talk to somebody who knows Arabic to call in and then sort of relay information back and forth. That's how I've learned it works in Morocco. So it's just extra steps, extra challenges. Mexico's another one where the radar it's poor. I'll call it poor, and sometimes you rely on being outside, looking at the clouds. I know a lot of the officials sort of make fun of me a lot of times because I do spend a lot of times outside staring at the clouds as storms are
Absolutely.
approaching, because I want to match up what's on the radar. I want to see that in the sky. And when I talk to them, I like to point it out like, hey, that dark cloud to the south, that's the one that has rain. That's the one that's moving our way. So everybody who's out on the golf course can then look up and say, yes, this is what we're worried about. This is what I'm watching as it's approaching. I feel like they really like that when I can get outside, I can point out exactly what's moving our direction and kind of show them what's coming our way.
I will embarrass myself for a second and tell we all have sort of if you're a forecaster, you have horror stories of times gone bad. And I worked in television for a period of time, and this was back in the day where like data flow was not as commonplace as it is today, right? We'd get data via satellites, or we actually had to go in and render the radar every 5 minutes to get the most recent image to show up on television, which if you're dealing with severe weather or in hurricanes or whatever, that's a real challenge. But it was just kind of a random summer evening. It was about 6:10. I was going on the news. I had hit, refresh on the radar. I go on TV and talk about how wonderful it was. Beautiful summer evening, nice and warm, and got off air and somebody came in and they're like, you idiot, like it is pouring outside right now. I was like, what's going on? And it turns out, a storm popped up. I needed to look out the window. And sometimes meteorology can be as simple as just look outside. You can learn something. It doesn't always need to be in a model or on a radar or whatever it is. But I have to imagine that when you go to places, you mentioned Morocco or Mexico, or where the observation network is not nearly as robust, you have to rely on other tools. It can be instinct. It can be looking at clouds and feeling the wind. Could be using your lightning network to proxy where storms are instead of a radar. Any other really unique ways that you've sort of solved the problem of weather observation when you didn't have it through technology?
That's true. And really, even in the US, sometimes the radar can be deceiving. sometimes I'll look at something on the radar that looks really quite threatening, and you'll step outside and you'll look, it's like that does not look threatening at all. And then that prompts me to maybe go back in and pick a different radar, a different angle to look at the storm, and realize no, it's not as threatening as it may appear. So I've always relied on, you got to look outside as well as on the screen to really get a holistic approach as to what's approaching.
Sure. What are some of the tournament locations or golf courses you've worked that have provided really unique challenges just because of local geography? And for people that listening that aren't meteorologists, that's always a challenge in weather, is like local topography, local geography can add, microclimates or really unique features that maybe the bigger pattern of weather wouldn't suggest a problem, but because of the orientation of mountains or whatever that is, you can get unique winds and unique rain scenarios. I'm curious, what are those sites that if you see it on your own personal calendar, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to pay attention to this uniqueness?
I have one coming up this summer. It's in Evian, France. It's on Lake Geneva with the French Alps in the backyard of the golf course. So as you're standing on the golf course, you look one way, you look up, there's the French Alps. You look the other way down the hill, there's Lake Geneva. It is positioned just in this location that the storms pop up right adjacent to the golf course on the mountain peaks each afternoon, and they can roll right down onto the golf course, into the lake. Sometimes they'll be just tracking along the lake, and you can just sit and look at the vantage point, staring at it. But the steering currents are so erratic there that you're never truly comfortable when you have storms developing in the area. And if you go into the U.S., a lot of times it's your West Coast events. If you're in Tahoe is a great example. The storms develop right on top of the hill, right on top of the mountaintop where you're at. And you just always have to be so aware. And these storms can develop so fast that they appear before they appear on radar. And that's another reason to always be alert as to what's happening on the outside, because you can usually see it outside first before it appears on the radar.
Yeah. You've seen a lot of tournaments, a lot of weather scenarios play out. What are some of the more kind of going through your 20-year memory bank, some of those big historical ones where you're like, that was a tough one. I'm really glad the way it turned out.
A number of years ago, I was in Memphis, and there's a pretty strong line of storms coming through, and one was tornado warned. It had a tornado on the ground approaching Memphis, and we had to make a decision, man, when that was probably 30 miles out, because it was moving. It was one of those storms that was moving at like 50 miles per hour. Yep. And the storm was way out there, and we have to make a decision now, before the storm even gets close, because they wanted everybody off property. You're talking all spectators, all volunteers, golfers, staff, everybody off property. And that takes a while. So we had made that decision well in advance. And you're always nervous because storms can split, they can move, all sorts of things can happen in a span of 30 miles when a storm is moving through. But that one did hold together. It did produce a tornado on the golf course, but it produced winds in excess of 60 miles an hour. And it did a lot of damage on the golf course. So we were just fortunate that everybody was off and home before that hit.
Yeah. What's that intensity level like when you get into a scenario? Like the casual golf fan is watching on TV and you go into delay, and typically coverage will go and show you what happened a day ago or a year ago. What are those scenarios like for you when you're in sort of the pressure packed moment of in delay or about to go into delay? These really critical kind of scary moments. You got 50,000 fans you got to evacuate. What's the pressure like in that environment?
There is the pressure, and again, the bigger the event, the more the pressure, because the more moving parts, and you just want to make sure everybody's safe. And there's a lot of factors. Sometimes you have parking on site, which is great because you can suspend play and people walk to their cars. But other times, if you have off-site parking, they bring in buses, but if you have 20, 30,000 people, everybody has to get on a bus and be bused to their parking destination. That can be hours long process. And we have messaging on the boards now to try and give people early alerts, and hopefully people take warning and start getting on the buses before play is suspended. But yeah, all those things go into are taken into consideration. And we have meetings early in the week that says, how long will it take to evacuate this course? And we look at all those things. Where's everybody parked at? How many buses are here? Those are all discussions that we have early in the week, so we can really kind of plan ahead. And severe weather, obviously we take extra precaution. We suspend extra early in the event of severe weather, but you have those times where stuff can pop up right very nearby and you have very little warning. Those still happen, and you just react very quickly to those.
Yeah, you hit on this. There are best practices for outdoor weather safety in general, and there are guidebooks that suggest, right, if there's lightning within 8 miles, suspend activity, wait until there hasn't been a strike for 30 minutes to resume play. Those are awesome principles to live by. But I'm curious, Wade, how do you see those change week to week? What are some of the factors? You hit on a couple of those right there. The factors that require customization and your expertise can lead to maybe altering those as you go site to site.
Yeah, I wish weather would follow a textbook sort of style, but it never does. Every situation is different. So some of the most difficult ones are the pop-up storms, the storms that develop almost right overhead or just adjacent to the golf course. And again, you need to have your eye to the sky to see, look how tall these clouds are getting, because that's going to happen before you see it on the radar. And when you start to see that and you start to understand exactly what's going on, you got to get all the plans in place. You have to get the evacuation staff staged at all the vehicles. You have to make sure everybody's ready. You have to get the messages running on the scoreboard, because you don't want to be caught off guard in those situations. So as long as you plan ahead and are ready to go. So yes, it is growing, but guess what? We got the plan in place. So when we do hit a point where we have to suspend, either there's a lightning strike occurring or the charge is building, and I can see that on my screen, we suspend play and things run smoothly. And that's really kind of what you want.
Absolutely. What's really neat about what you and your team do, Wade, is just the incredible familiarity you have with the customer, understanding operations, being very embedded in those operations. And you and I have chatted about this in the past. We at DTN have used that as sort of the example for how do we improve weather risk for other entities not in golf, whether it's live events, utilities, aviation. There are things that we learn through this particular embeddedness as weather risk communicators that we can carry elsewhere. What are some of those things in terms of communicating weather risk, understanding operations, that you think are important for any industry that has a weather risk profile, so to speak, to understand that can help them mitigate risk going forward?
With the 20 years that I've spent on the PGA Tour, I can see a weather situation happening. Maybe it's a day later, 2 days later, and have an idea in my mind the impacts that it's going to have to the tournament. And with that, I can start to make recommendations and make sure that everybody's on the same page, because some people might not be paying attention. It's like, hey, you need to pay attention today, because at 3 o'clock is when I'm expecting these storms to start getting in the area. So make sure your team is ready. Make sure everybody is ready for these events. And it's that knowledge of how events work and what's important to all the different groups that work within these large tournaments. That I can sort of proactively talk to them ahead of time. It's like, this is what's coming, and this is what I think is going to happen, and this is how it's going to impact you. Those are conversations that we have even 1, 2, 3 days ahead of possible weather.
Yeah, I think there's such a translation of that to any industry that has weather concern there. It's understanding the operations, understanding the decision, understanding the weather impact, and quite frankly, developing a plan before it's too late. If you didn't have a weather action plan developed together with these golf tours and golf entities, imagine the chaos that would ensue if all of a sudden you're like, oh, by the way, there's lightning. We need to do this, right? The preparation makes the action work.
It does. In my early days, I would see that, and I would see things sort of fall apart during some of these weather delays because they're not prepared, and you remember that. And when you see a similar situation happen again in the future, you try to rectify that. You make sure people are aware of what's coming, and correct the mistakes that we've made in the past so we don't make them again.
Sure. How have you worked on those protocols, and in terms of that organization layer and that awareness layer from 20 years ago? I know it's dramatically different than it is today. What are some of those activities that you've worked on that have helped us and our customer really communicate well together and be on the same page?
Yeah, the PGA Tour has a very robust weather action plan in place now, and a lot of that is focused towards the spectators, the general public, the volunteers, to make sure that they're all taken care of. We all know that when you suspend play, golfers are sort of swept up in evacuation vans and vehicles. That process goes very smoothly all the time. It's sort of the other entities that become caught off guard, and those are the ones that they've really focused on. And a lot of that is the spectators, especially if you have parking that's remote. Those type of things, we want to make sure that we got those things buttoned up ahead of time, so when we do suspend play, it's a smooth process amongst all committees.
Absolutely. All right, we are going to wrap up here with our favorite segment on DTNsights called Heat Burst. So I'm going to throw a couple rapid fun questions your way,
Okay.
and would love to hear the experience. So you've truly traveled the world. What do you think is the best location you've got to work, just to make us all a little jealous?
I love Japan.
Japan.
I do love Japan. I can't wait to go back to Japan again.
What about Japan did you fall in love with?
Everything is just so neat and clean, and the people are so polite. It's just such a great place to be. Their technology is top notch. It's true, when you're in Japan, sometimes you feel like you're living in the future, and I love everything about Japan.
That's awesome. Okay, on all these travels, where's the best food that you get excited to get to partake in?
Oh my God, I'm going to repeat this again and say Japan.
There you go.
I do love sushi, and I love the freshness of food. It really, that can be any Asia events. Korea is great. I've been to Thailand, fantastic. I love traveling to Asia, and a lot of that is due to the food.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you think was the most fun event that you've got to sort of experience, not just from the weather perspective, but maybe the gravity of the event, feeling like you were a part of it? And I think your list has to be massive, by the way, but if you could distill down a couple of the major events that stick out in your mind, like, wow, I got to cover that and provide weather support for that, what would that
This is
list?
this is an easy answer. It's hands down the Paris Olympics.
Awesome.
That was the best, and really any of the Olympic events, Paris was the best. And the thing I love about the Olympics is you have the best people at what they do that get invited to work at the Olympics. And it is such a collaboration of all these countries, all these different cultures that are coming together, that people that you don't work with normally, and you make this event happen. PGA Tour, everybody has this core group that kind of travels week to week. The Olympics is just a smattering of people from around the world that come, and we make this event happen. And it's a great thing to be part of.
That's awesome. And hard not to feel the pride of being there as an American, but just the pride of the Olympics is something awesome. I've never been to one. That's something that I want to get to. Have you worked the Ryder Cup?
I have worked the Ryder Cup, I believe twice in my past.
What's that intensity like?
There's so much energy at a Ryder Cup. You can walk around the grounds and you just hear these eruptions of applause, and people, everyone's dressed up. It's like an experience that doesn't repeat itself anywhere else on the tour. Ryder Cups are special to work at.
I would argue the waste management is similar.
It is similar. That is a unique one all by itself. Yes, of course.
Yep. You have to forecast, beer being tossed on the greens and the impact on the agronomy on that one.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. That one,
the security channel on the radio is quite entertaining during that week.
This is a G-rated show, so we'll keep it at that. But that is a wild one out there, and certainly a fun one. That's awesome. If you had to tell a person that, say me, I'm a golf nut, to get to one event, what's the one that people should go to?
The Players Championship. They are so focused on the fan experience at the Players Championship, and you're always going to have the best golfers in the world there. That hands down is the best one to visit for any golf fan.
Awesome. We'll wrap up with this one. When you're away from work, away from weather, what does Wade Stettner enjoy doing?
I like taking my dog Snickers for walks.
Oh, Snickers had to make the podcast. That's awesome.
He did. He's sleeping right here. He's sleeping right here. He's a good dog.
If Snickers was awake, we would need an appearance on here. But Snickers is famous inside of DTN. Awesome dog. That's really awesome. Well, Wade, you mentioned that the Olympics is, your favorite event. I would say you are a gold medal winning meteorologist. You represent DTN so well out on the tour, and I'm not bragging on you here. I also hear it from the customers that you work with on how much trust you instill and how important you are. So on behalf of DTN, we appreciate you for the work that you do and the work that your team does. It's and again, I get a little jealous of all the cool places you get to go in the tournaments you get to see, because it's a pretty cool job that you have.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and really, it's the entire team that we go week to week. We're all road warriors. They make my job easy because they do such a great job week in, week out. I think we work together as a team so well, and we provide the same level of service, no matter if it's the Players Championship or the Masters versus a very small event. We want to give that same level of service to everybody that we provide service to.
Absolutely. Very critical. Well, Wade, thanks again for joining us on DTNsights. Really cool stories. And good luck on your travels. And here's to good wishes for great forecasts and quiet tournaments.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Renny.
Yep. All right. Take care. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for DTNsights. I'm Renny Vandewege with Wade Stettner. Have a great day.